Directed by Stanley Kubrick, most known for faking the moon landing with a 2001's A Space Odyssey's extra footage, A Clockwork Orange is based on the 1962 novel of the same name by Anthony Burgess, a novel that we're going to ignore for the duration of this video, due to books being a conspiracy by the evil paper companies to have an excuse to destroy the rainforests. The story takes place in a completely fictional location known as Britain, which just so happens to be a dystopian futuristic setting where the streets are ruled by violent youths wielding deadly weapons. Something that would never happen in the United Kingdom, a story that was also banned in several countries, as well as being pulled from British cinemas due to people's inability to enjoy a feel-good family movie. But they all eventually came around to it, because everyone hated it, until they realised they loved it. The movie wasn't received particularly well, as it was used as a scapegoat for a handful of quote, copycat crimes, and it wasn't until a few years later, when people realised that juvenile delinquency was actually a good thing that society needed, that it started to garner a cult following. And speaking of juvenile delinquency, the movie begins with the main character, Alex, being played by Malcolm McDowell, and his group of friends which he refers to as his droogs, Dim, Georgie and Pete, as they all drink glasses of milk like the tough guys that they are. Milk that just so happens to contain copious amounts of drugs. The best kind of milk. After suckling the cow's breast, the gang head out for some good old-fashioned homeless bashing before coming across a rival gang sexually assaulting a woman in an abandoned casino. Them, preferring to be the ones doing the sexual assaulting around here, violently beat the group with bats and chains, not because they wanted to save the woman, but because they wanted a bit of that old ultra-violence, which is like normal violence, except on ultra settings. Once they're done bashing in the brains of people for the fun of it, they drive out into the countryside to the secluded house of a writer, Frank, and his wife Mary, who rather unfortunately aren't too fond of being horrifically and brutally assaulted, which is somewhat of a shame, as Alex tricks them into opening the front door by saying there's been an accident, before completely trashing the home, trashing Frank's spinal cord, and trashing Mary's very existence by brutally having their way with her. After a hard, tiresome night of being British, they return to the milk bar to top up their calcium reserves, where Alex hits Dim with a club after Dim mocks a woman for singing to Beethoven. Ludwig van Beethoven being Alex's only true love and passion. Well, apart from the ultraviolence, as he's got somewhat of a thing for eccentric German dudes. Alex cares for no one but himself and some weird German dude who probably did weird German things, with him showing absolutely no hesitation whatsoever when it comes to assaulting his so-called friends, because to him, they're just pawns to do his bidding, because apparently they have a domination fetish. The next day, after a late night of doing homework and chores, Alex is paid a visit by his probation officer for a routine molestation, because he proceeds to grab his testicles for absolutely no reason, other than he wanted to know what they felt like. After getting blueballed like that, Alex decides to head out to pick two girls up from the record store, who he proceeds to bring back to his bedroom for some more of that homework. Meanwhile, his droogs have been waiting for him, as they've been devising a plan of their own to make some money. But the thing is, Alex isn't particularly fond of his friends having free will and the ability to think for themselves, and takes great offense at the fact that this group of criminals would discuss doing something involving criminality. To show them that he's the only one who does the thinking around here, he thinks that they're rather smelly, so decides to kick George and Dim into the canal for some of that good old-fashioned city piss water, as it's important to stay hydrated. He finishes it off by cutting Dim's hand after pretending to offer his help, before having them explain their plan to him anyway, because at the end of the day, there's nothing Alex likes more than a nice friendly chat with his friends. The plan is to break into an isolated home owned by a rich cat lady who rather anticlimactically isn't a feline-human hybrid, and when Alex's usual method of pretending there's been an accident fails, he climbs through the window just as the not-a-cat Catwoman calls the police, because there's a man with a weird haircut outside of her house. Except he's now inside of her house, and she attacks him with a bust of Beethoven, but luckily for Alex, he likes to receive head from random older women, keeping her at bay using his incredibly large penis statue. He eventually gets her to the floor before crushing her head with the statue, as she just can't seem to get it out of her mind. After hearing the police sirens approaching, he attempts to flee from the house, but is immediately bottled across the face with a bottle of milk by Dim, as he's helping to keep the homies hydrated. And Alex, like the big tough gangster that he is, immediately tries to blame the crime on his droogs, before being punched in the face for giving a man a non-consensual testicular cancer exam, followed by being spat on by his probation officer because he was hallucinating he was on fire and wanted to put him out. After being caught red-handed, well, penis-handed. Alex is sentenced to 14 years in prison for the murder of the weird cat lady, because boys will be boys. After making sure that his anus is still where it's supposed to be, it skips ahead 2 years, as we see that Alex has been keeping himself out of trouble, giving off the appearance of a model inmate. But deep down inside, after learning about the Marvel character known as God, he imagines himself as a Roman soldier whipping Jesus, like any healthy young man would. While he's been incarcerated, he's heard rumours of a new special kind of treatment known as the Ludovico technique, that would supposedly see inmates rehabilitated and released in 2 weeks. And luckily for Alex, because he's such a well-behaved little psychopath, he's handpicked by the Home Secretary, where he's then transferred to the Ludovico facility and has something injected into his bum. Luckily for Alex, his treatment includes getting to watch a bunch of movies all day, as we see that he's wrapped up in a straitjacket with his eyelids forced open. A doctor, who is played by an actual doctor, routinely puts eye drops into Alex's eyes to stop them from drying out, as he's forced to watch horrifically violent films. Footage that eventually starts to make him feel unwell. With no ability to close his eyes or look away, Alex is forced to watch the increasingly disturbing footage, while the injection from earlier temporarily paralyzes his body while forcing an extreme feeling of fear and terror on him, all the while music of Beethoven plays in the background. The Ludovico technique, being like your average evening on 4chan, is a form of aversion therapy, in that he's entirely unable to avert his eyes away from the horrors on screen, which now cause him to feel violently sick, juxtaposed to the feeling of joy and satisfaction that he once felt while acting them out. A scene that saw Malcolm McDowell suffering from actual scratched corneas, causing him to go temporarily blind. After Alex's relaxing spa treatment comes to an end, he puts on a show for the whole class so he can share everything that he's learnt with them. A show that involves him being mocked, assaulted and pushed to the ground, where Malcolm supposedly ended up cracking a few ribs in the process after losing a battle with the floor. Alex feels the urge to fight back and to stand up for himself, which is immediately followed by the overwhelming feeling of sickness and terror at the thought of committing any violence. Next, a topless woman walks onto the stage, causing Alex to stop in his tracks, as the closest thing that he's seen to a topless woman in the last 2 years was a slightly overweight man in the musty prison showers. But the only thing that Alex can feel rising is his lunch from earlier. He's been cured. He's disgusted by women. After the doctors and officials are satisfied with Alex's newly found misogyny and inability to stand up for himself, this violent murderer is released from prison after only serving 2 years. So he returns home to find that his parents have been renting his room out, resulting in Alex attempting to fight the lodger, but being physically unable to, on account of being a little bitch boy. Much like the show on stage, the effects of the Ludovico therapy translate to real-world scenarios as well, so he has no choice but to accept the fact that his room is no longer his, and that he needs to find somewhere else to live because his broke ass isn't wanted around here. He contemplates jumping from a bridge after mummy and daddy said no to him, and while he's thinking about how many flips he could do before he hits the bottom, he's interrupted by a homeless man asking for change. The same homeless man that he and his droogs viciously assaulted at the beginning of the movie for being a little bit stinky. He's then repaid the favour by the man and a group of his home-deficient friends before being saved by the police. 2 police officers who just so happen to be Georgie and Dim, his old droogs. Violent psychopathic members of the police force. Fiction. They take Alex out into the countryside to cool off for a bit by forcing his head into an animal water trough before repeatedly beating him with their big black throbbing sticks. Alex is left for dead to think about how much of a naughty little boy he's been, and to make a good day even better, he finds himself aimlessly wandering through the countryside when he accidentally stumbles upon the house of Frank and Mary. But it appears that Mary has turned into a big burly man named Julian as he carries in an injured Alex who has no idea where he is. Alex eventually wakes up and sees that Frank is in a wheelchair, but Frank doesn't seem to recognize Alex from the attack, on account of the part of the brain that deals with memories being stored in the legs. But Frank does recognize Alex from the newspapers, as they've been printing about the success of the Ludovico therapy, and Frank thinks that he can use Alex for his own political agenda by attempting to make the government look bad, something that shouldn't be too hard to accomplish, considering that they actually are bad. Sorry for the spoiler. While in the bath, Alex begins singing the song, Singing in the Rain, the song that he was singing last time he was here, when he was rapping in the house. Mary died not long after the attack, and Frank realizes who Alex is after hearing his beautiful voice. After his bath, Alex explains the horrors of his treatment to Frank, before passing out face first in his food because he's apparently allergic to spaghetti. He then wakes up in a different location where he's locked in a bedroom. The sound of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony begins blaring over the speaker system, causing Alex to feel the overwhelming feeling of extreme panic and sickness. With no way out of the room, Alex decides to choose the path of least resistance balance, while forgetting that the floor offers up very much resistance to an object in freefall. Once again he reawakens, but this time in the hospital, as he survived. Frank and his friends have informed the newspapers about Alex's attempt to headbutt the concrete, stating that it's the government's fault and their barbaric treatment is to blame for Alex thinking he can outsmart gravity. But because of this, Alex has become a victim in the eyes of the public. This psychopathic, narcissistic, violent person has been turned into the victim. After some time recovering, he's paid a visit by a psychiatrist in the hospital, where he mentions to her that he's been experiencing these reoccurring dreams of doctors performing brain surgery on him. She proceeds to ask him a few questions, and when he gives her the answers, they very much seem like the answers that old Alex would have given before being made to watch those funny home videos. Sometime later, he's also paid a visit by the Home Secretary, the same man who personally chose him to receive the Ludovico technique, and the same man who's currently having his name dragged through the dirt as the papers are blaming him for Alex almost dying. Once again, here is another person aiming to use Alex in the pursuit of their own personal and political agenda. He tells him that Frank's been locked up and put away for his actions, and that he's going to give Alex a well-respected and high-paying job to make sure that Alex stays on his side. The movie then comes to an end with Alex being cured, becoming a powerful and close ally of the government, and being given access to easy money, as well as becoming a well-liked public figure. And by cured, I mean he no longer feels violently sick while thinking about the horrific things that he very much wants to do, and very much will do. The recurring brain surgery dream that Alex mentioned to the therapist could very well have actually been government doctors reversing the intended effects of the treatment, putting Alex back into the exact same state that he was right before all of this began, except with a lot more money and a lot more power. That, or he faked the entire thing. Because when it comes to A Clockwork Orange, a lot of it is very much up to the viewer's interpretation, because just like that time I took bath salts, I have absolutely no idea what's going on, and Mum, can you please come pick me up, I'm scared. Now before this video comes to an end, I'd like to just give a massive shout out and a big thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons. The people who every month continue to go out of their way to show support towards the channel, something which I'm incredibly appreciative of. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or a patron yourself, not only are you just generally being a great help, but you also get access to a few little cool perks, like being able to join the private Discord server, where you can then get links to uncensored versions of all videos going forward. Starting off with this week's new YouTube signups, a massive thank you to David, Loon96, Macy K1054, Stephen Todd, Kishjin Atapod, Gabriel Escalada, Luca, Keegan Neely, Anomaly, Jack Lane, Zuranto, Zane Monroe, KST, Sharka, Thy Lordship, Saskoy Dominic, Thomas Stewart, Simulation Flow, Benedict Martel, Mia, Kason Talbot, Captain Beans, TJ, Starlord, Dark, Galligan, Thunderstorm, Jordan Parker, Christian Haskell, Die, Jennifer Delgadillo, One-Armed Shinobi, Snippling S, Hubert Safurga, Ben Cobfield, Tuba Goes Yeet, K, Sungaf Fandafarian, Beto the Chicken Guy, Pedro Manfrenate Martendel, Mano Ferrero, Lights Aida, Reigns VT, GB Hub, Mike Crane, and Crystal. Now heading over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to William Sillis, Vic Quoa, Sinner, Master Tank, VHS Soho, Lars Baker, Joseph Butcher, Aaron, Tristan Van Selm, Giacomo Milligan, Aaron Dix, Mark Ruffalo, Cameron Taylor, Dylan Russell, Lloyd Edwards, Oscar Slan, Nalu, Idle Mog, M, Toby6901, Serge Quickie, Buggy15, Wee Wee, Moss, Praline, Clementine Bostock, Briar Fletcher, Alexis Miller, Duco Stam, Chase Amerson, Trevin Duncombe, Brady, Luis Garcia, Richard Wiener, Angel P. Iglesias, 01, Cameron Captree, Amelia Gray, Dreadhead, LE1234, Amber, Chasefer, Callum Mitchell, Sylvie Devine, Sophine Hayek, Frank the Tank, Weldon, Basparol, Harrison King, Anxious Gamer 30, Commander Spleen, Christian Viordiak, Austin, Gary, Andrea Hernandez, Pavel, Rick Colby, Bossy, and Matei Pika. So once again, a big shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.